Hi, you may have heard me talk about reprogramming your brain, but what does that really mean? Well, I want to just give you a bit more insight into that. I was reading some research today which basically was looking at the general idea of fake news, right? How is it that fake news spreads, and why is it that we don't recognize fake news? And more interestingly, why is it that we're prepared to spread fake news even if you know it's not true? Well, the answer is this. The more we're exposed to an idea, even if it's fake news, right? The more we're exposed to something, the more we feel it's true, even if we know it is not true. And the more likely we are to share it, even if we know it's not true, and the more likely we are to take responsibility for sharing it. So what this means is that you'll have heard me say also probably that the power of practice is incredible, right? So if you've been anxious for a long time, you have in principle been practicing being anxious, which means that you have been feeling that feeling of threat, trepidation, that emotion of fear, and you've been making decisions based on that fear. You've been avoiding, you've been hiding, you've been running, you've been suppressing, you've been doing something which has told your body and your brain that this feeling of anxiety is legitimate. It actually predicts something in the external world, even when you know it really logically, you know it doesn't, right? I say to people, in the external world, where is your threat? And they say, well, there isn't one. But I feel anxious, and so, I've got to hide, I've got to run, I've got to avoid. Every time you do that, you are practicing being anxious, which basically means you're telling your brain that your anxiety is legitimate. Now, if you go back to this fake news experiment, right, the more you do something, the more it feels true, even though you know it's not true. And that's where we are with anxiety, right? You know you don't actually have an external world threat, but you feel like your anxiety is true. And that's the great work. That's the thing we have to change. We have to change the belief that you have that your anxiety is in any way legitimate, right? It is an illegitimate process that you have practiced believing simply through familiarity. That's what reprogramming your brain means. It means to reprogram the beliefs you have about the legitimacy, the validity, and the usefulness of anxiety and worry, and in fact, every other psychological problem. And this is what you have to focus your attention on. Anything else, like a medication or any external world solution, is irrelevant. You've got to focus your attention on changing the belief that you have that your anxiety is legitimate. That's reprogramming your brain.